So today on Foodie's Confident and Eating podcast, we have Shirley from Vitality Vibe. So a little bit of background on Shirley that I find really interesting was the first time she sat on a yoga mat, in her own words, she thought, what a load of crap. At that time, she was a triathlete, and I think movement would probably be more about performance and pushing rather than sitting still. But over a period of repeated injuries and beginning to understand her own body, she realized that stretching had to become part of, she wanted actually, I'll rephrase that, wanted stretching to become part of her training routine. She then mentions about how her dad became unwell, and I can identify with this piece that when she was on the mat, it was the time that she found that she possibly was supporting him and the family, but she wasn't thinking about him. And the word that came to mind when I read her words was peace. And I think what Shirley has mentioned, and I can attest to this too, is when you're on your mat, there are no other thoughts coming into, I think over time, you get to the place where other thoughts about other things in your life just become still. And if we talk about meditation or if we talk about being present, it is a place that you can really feel presence. So off she went to India and went on to become a yoga teacher and continued her education in the UK. Wonderful selection of yoga, which is really fab to hear. Prenatal yoga, children's yoga, athletes yoga, and acro yoga. She is also, I know, a breath coach, and she does a lot of work around stress management, meditation, mindfulness as well. So Shirley, I'm so glad you're going to be on here and chatting to me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm delighted to be joining you.
Super. So go on, give me a little introduction on you. That's what you've written and I picked up on. But anything else you wanted to share with my lovely audience?
Okay, what else do I want to share? So I suppose my mission in life is to, I'm going to start off with Ireland and then try to get it international. But my mission is for everyone in Ireland to practice yoga. And not just, yoga with me, because I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but just to develop a yoga practice with someone, like someone in their area. It's not so taboo anymore. Like yoga is like out there now. When I first started teaching over 10 years ago, there was maybe me and I don't know, 2 other yoga teachers maybe in my area. And now, oh my, I couldn't even count, there's at least 32, if not 52, it really exploded in terms of teachers and in terms of students, in terms of its popularity. So yeah, my little mission in my head is that if I could get everybody in Ireland to practice yoga, and because I've taught so many different styles, I know it's possible. Like I have taught yoga to senior citizens that can't get up out of their chair. I've taught it to autistic children. I've taught it to teenagers. I've taught it to 6-year-olds, a very short attention span. There's not one person that would not benefit from yoga. I even actually taught it to a farmer one time when he was calving a cow and his back was killing him. I says, here, do this stretch. And I helped him get the calf out. And but like I said, there's no demographic that yoga wouldn't benefit, is what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm trying to say the same to my young, one of my kids, because my girls do embrace it in different ways. They're not actively doing yoga, but they're doing gymnastics, so similar movements. I'm trying to tell my son that, lots of the football players for Liverpool do yoga. They know the value and the power of stretching, but he's just not quite there yet.
And you know what? I totally understand that. And I think the thing about yoga is number one, you have to try a few different teachers. So I always say to my new students, when they come to me, I'm like, if you don't like today's session, it's not that you don't like yoga. It's just you don't like the way I'm delivering it. I always say to people yoga, when I'm talking to women, I say yoga is a bit like hairdressers. You have to try a few of them and then you find the one you like. Or if I'm talking to a man, I go, I know this is very sexist, but I go, yoga is a bit like a good pub. You have to find the one where the crack is and you enjoy going there. And
that's good.
So they're the kind of similarities I put in when I'm speaking to someone who's never tried it, is that try it a few times. Don't just try it with one teacher and think, oh, that's yoga, I don't like it. because there's so many different ways to deliver it. And then there's like so many myths around yoga. So like your young son, there's like one of the biggest myths is that I feel like I'm saying myths instead of myth.
Myth. I'm hearing you as myth.
Yeah, okay, that's all right. So we're not talking about your oven myths. We're talking about your legendary myth. Is that, oh, yoga's for women. You know, that's something for women. That's not something men do. I have taught yoga to like men only classes. I have taught it to like GA players, and they're actually really surprised at how challenging it is. And I think they get like a newfound respect for yoga and for maybe the women in their lives that do yoga, because they always say to me, this is actually way harder than I thought it was going to be.
But that's the thing with them, and I do it with them, and they kind of often stray in and out with me here, and they're like, "Oh, mommy, this is actually hard." I'm like, "Yeah, guys, it's not. You don't just." Another myth is, I think people think you go and you sit in the mat and you just meditate, but they don't realize, I suppose, once you get into it, the strength that you actually have to engage with within yourself to hold the pose, to breathe, and maybe your mental capacity to go, I can do this. It feels a little bit hard, but I know I can do this. I suppose that's one of the things that yoga has taught me.
Oh my God, yes. It strengthens us both physically and mentally. So I would always say to my students when they're like in a pose and it's challenging and they want to get out of it, and I'm saying to them, right, like just stay in this and breathe through it. And when you get into the habit of doing that on the mat, then you start to do it off the mat. And what I mean by that is when you find yourself in uncomfortable situations outside of a yoga room, you're like, okay, I can deal with this. I'm going to breathe through it because you've had the training on the yoga mat, if that makes sense.
Totally. And over years, because I did the breath coaching training as well, and something I would use with people when they are, you know, maybe anxious about their food or going to the fridge just to calm themselves down in the moment. But what I find is that if you practice yoga, your breath comes to you more naturally because you're used to leaning into your breath to just calm that nervous system, to allow space for options and possibilities rather than the stress reaction, which is what's often happening for people. I just want to give everyone an idea of what I wanted to chat to you about today. And I suppose, as you know, my mission is to support everyone in Ireland first and globally, wherever you're from, to build a positive, productive relationship with food. It's no secret that diet culture, you know, has really made us, I suppose it has profited from our insecurities. And there is this notion or ideal that thinness is put on a pedestal, and we try and look after our health by achieving thinness, but when we can't stick to the program, we actually end up blaming ourselves more than actually taking off the glasses and go, well, I tried something. Just like you said, I tried that teacher. It wasn't the yoga and it wasn't the teacher. It was our connection wasn't right. So if the dieting and the achieving thinness hasn't worked for you, then when you unlink movement from your body or your weight or your body or your external appearance, and you start moving for that movement more from an intrinsic and internal motivation, that's how you begin to build velocity and momentum in your practice for doing any action when it comes to looking after your health. Because when we're motivated from the inside out, if we fall off the wagon, we don't give ourselves shit about that. We just get back up again and we go, that was a week. That was a month. I had a good long 6 weeks there where for one reason or 100, I couldn't get to my movement. And now I'm back and I'm like, oh my God, like I thought I was going to lose everything. But I held myself in those moments and went, you know, it's just this period of time. Other life priorities are kicking in here. So for anyone out there who does want to unlink their movement from their weight and their body appearance, Shirley was the one that I wanted to bring on and chat to you about. And I wanted really to dig into understanding how you could use yoga in that journey of intuitive movement. So intuitive movement means that the movement comes without any strings attached. You do it because you bring it joy. It brings you joy and it brings you pleasure. The amount of women who, when I go through initial assessment, they're like, oh, I go running every day, but I hate it. And imagine if that thought is going around in your head all day long. Like, what's your success rate? What's your ability to perform in that? So I want to open up your mind to the possibility that you could find movement that really, you're not that person who has to put your gym gear on the ground and say, I have to do it. You're the one who's like, Jesus, how can I fit it in? Where can I get it in today? So question I have for you, Shirley, is approaching yoga with curiosity. And I have one sentence of yours that I loved, and I'm going to read out. Before, I was very interested in the physical aspects of yoga, sweating, contorted shapes. And while I still really enjoy the physical, I move my body so differently now, and the mental aspects intrigue me more. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Previous to starting yoga, I was doing triathlon. So I always liked that physical challenge of pushing your body and, that no pain, no gain attitude. Yeah, I would be the one that was training for a triathlon and would put on, my runners and get out and do that 13K run in the snow because it was on my training schedule and I had to stick to that. And so I would just drive on, push on. And then I had a really severe car accident. And so that then it actually made me have to move differently and look at movement differently. In the car accident, I was in a brace for 3 months. I broke my neck. I had a brain hemorrhage. I'd done lots of kind of superficial things to the left side of the body. And so I no longer had movement to relieve stress. And so I think I was always pushing myself because it just allowed me to escape from my thoughts. So anytime there was something going on in my life, I would put on the runners and do a 10K run, and then I would feel a bit better, and then I would go on about my day. I suppose I was using movement as a coping mechanism for what was going on upstairs mentally.
Just wondering, did the thoughts come back later in the day? Or the next day, or the next day? Were they gone?
I think they were still there as I was running, but it felt like, when you're just like, oh, when there's so much going on, it needs an outlet. And so for me, it was just like, run, Shirley, run it out of you.
Yeah.
And then when I had that accident, I had no choice but to sit still on a yoga mat. And I literally cried. I remember sitting there crying because that option was taken away from me, that option of being able to run my overthinking mind, run away from it. Yeah. So then that's when I became really interested in, I suppose, the mind and what we can do. If the mind's going to be there and we can't run away from it, how do we sit and face it and go, okay, and so that's why I got more into, well, first of all, I was forced to slow down. I have to hold my hands up to that. I don't know if I would have chosen to do it quite so soon. I probably would have morphed into it at some point, but it was literally just like, I didn't have an option anymore. I had to go still. I had to approach my yoga from a totally different perspective. So there was no ego allowed anymore because my body was so broken. Like I had to be happy with being able to do some cat-cow spinal movements. Whereas before, if I rolled out my mat, it had to be like, an hour-long sweaty practice. It was the same as if I went for a swim. So pre-accident, if I went swim training, there was no point in getting wet unless I was going to swim for at least like, I don't know, 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers. Like, there was none of this just getting in and like, breaststroking. Having fun. No, it was in, head down. And so then after the accident, all my movement changed. So my movement on the mat, my movements off the mat, everything, I became very much body aware and I became very much, okay, that aggravates my back. And so I had to really strip it all down and start again. And when I started over, I really started moving from a place of taking care of my body rather than pushing it to achieve something. I really started listening and went, okay, you don't like when I do that. I tried to go back running. So for several years after the accident, I was like, that's it. I'm going to get back running. I'm going to get back doing headstands. I'm going to, and I kept pushing, which probably actually delayed the recovery, that pushing.
What I'm hearing there is it was very performative, which I think we all see nearly about our exercises, that there has to be something at the end to be proud of. And that comes from performance rather than, Jesus, aren't I amazing? I just got up and looked after myself today.
Oh, yeah. No, I would never give myself a gold star just for easy. Be awarded, if you pushed yourself and like that, if you achieve something. And I think there's a link there, with achievement and self-worth for me anyway. And there's a link with, my body weight and my self-worth. And there's that whole element. That I've gotten a lot better from. There's a lot more distance between, that and my self-worth, but it still creeps in. I mean, it's still, like you said, it's that diet mentality that's in there from such a young age. And
the culture we kind of do live in, if you think about a lot of work environments, it's always about doing a little bit more, giving 10% more. And we don't really sit and celebrate, what have I already achieved? How far have I come? Yeah, it's a really fine balance, isn't it, to find how do I work with what I have and stretch myself a little bit, but stop comparing myself to maybe everyone else or that societal ideal, or maybe it's just your friend you compare yourself to.
Yeah, I used to do it all the time in yoga class. I mean, you couldn't help it, right? You'd be like in a yoga pose, but you'd be sneakily like looking around the room to see like who was doing it better. Like, where were you on that scale, you know? Whereas now, I mean, the odd time it will still come into my mind. And then I go, Shirley, your body was broken. Like, it's amazing that you can just do downward dog. You know, like I was told I would never be a yoga teacher again. You know, I was told lots of different things. And so I suppose now there's a lot more compassion and a lot less comparison.
And what I'm hearing there is so much more compassion, but also I was told, and the strength and the resilience to move beyond that.
Oh, I'm very stubborn.
Yeah, but I suppose you can be stubborn in ways I can identify with. I'm hugely stubborn too, and I'm very impatient. Those parts of us, we think they're a bad thing. But if we're doing it with the right intention, so it's the intention attached behind the stubbornness, does that bring us the better results? So I wouldn't necessarily say anymore that stubborn is bad for me personally, because I know it helps me to achieve the things that I want to achieve, but I have to watch when it just tips that boundary of pushing me too much.
Yeah, I would agree. So it's definitely like, it definitely helped in my recovery, because I kept being told, oh no, you know, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And, you know, with the brain injury, they were like, you shouldn't do anything for longer than a half an hour. So they were like, don't read for more than half an hour, don't drive, don't like be on your laptop. And I'm like, lads, this is like not life. This is not sustainable. You know, this little half hour clock. And so then, yeah, I got really kind of interested in the mind and how I could nourish it through food, through meditation, even through breath work.
So for me, what I'm kind of hearing us both discuss there is when you approach movement that's attached to more of an intrinsic motivation, you're looking at what your body can do for you rather than what it doesn't do. I think that's so true on the yoga mat. It's like I used to always look at the people and say, why can they do a forward fold? And I can't do a forward fold. And I think it took me 8 years to be able to do a forward fold. But all the time just appreciating, oh, okay, God, that took me 3 months, but I got a little bit further down. And yeah, I think overall, that is the message, isn't it? That we want to see what our body can do, learn how to work with its limits, and then gently stretch our own capacity.
Oh, 1,000,000%. And like I done like anatomy training with this guy called Paul Grilly. Fantastic. But even if you look at the anatomy, like the length of my femur, so like my thigh bone is going to be different to the length of yours. Like hip sockets, even he talked about hip sockets and how in certain parts of the world, the socket's much deeper, in other parts it's more shallow. And so that's going to hugely affect your hip mobility. So if we're trying to compare ourselves to something we've seen in a magazine or to someone that's from a different part of the world that has different ancestry than us, you're just never going to get to that shape, because anatomically your body will never do it. So if you keep comparing and keep striving to be that, you're always going to be disappointed. You're always going to be hard on yourself. So for me, it's like, okay, Shirley, you know, your body's been through this. And just try to appreciate, because I was super flexible when I had my accident. I'd been training really hard in terms of yoga, like 5 times a week, big sweaty practice, you know, very flexible. And then I lost all of it. Gone. And I had to rebuild it. And so some of the yoga poses, I'm still not back. And this is 10 years on from my car accident, and I'm still not there. But I have to go, yeah, Shirley, that's because that shoulder got practically dislocated in a car crash. Like you can't expect it to look like it did 10 years ago. And even if you haven't had a trauma, as women, our bodies are constantly changing as we age. That's just the beauty of aging. Things are going to look different and act different, and we need to accept everything as we're going along through the different stages.
100%. Even when you talk about your accident, I suppose what I would say is that as somebody had 3 C-sections, I was told I'd never have a strong core again and I'd never be able to do so much. But once I began to accept, okay, well, this is my body now. Look what I have. I've got 3 beautiful children most of the time. Sometimes they wreck my head. but for the most part, we do good together. But it's about accepting that part of your body. It's like, maybe I'll never do some of the things I see somebody who's probably doing yoga 4 or 5 hours a day, because what we see on Instagram, or I would say the same of maybe people who go to the gym, you know, when you see the ads for the protein shakes and this is going to change your body composition or whatever, I always want to ask that person, well, how many hours do you work out? Because the only thing that I ever found as somebody who never had big muscle mass when I was younger, the only thing I found that built muscle was repeatedly and consistently doing the exercises. And I suppose that's a bit about what we were talking about earlier, about embracing your enoughness. Like, just who you are now is enough. You mentioned about self-worth. Our worth is just us being a human. If we base it on external ideals, we lose that connection with why we're doing what we're doing.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it's such a tricky balance when you've been conditioned. There are days when I do default back into, oh my God, I've gained fucking 10 pounds. Like, you know, and then I'm so hard on myself and and it goes into this little snowball, you know, and then I have to stop myself and go, hang on, Shirley. Yeah, you gained 10 pounds because you've been through some very rough stuff in the last few months. You were eating to comfort yourself, you know. It's a goal of mine to have my self-worth purely on the fact that I'm a human and I'm alive and I'm actually a nice human. I think I'm a kind human. I would imagine I'm like, hand on heart, 60-40 maybe. Like 60% of the time I can be like, yeah, I'm fucking worth it because I'm just Shirley. And then there's that 40% of the time where I'm still kind of going, you know, I should have done this better. I should have said that better. I you know.
Oh my God, I totally agree with you on that one, because I think sometimes when even I look at the way my media goes out, and we probably put out the best parts of us and what people see. But the reality is that I don't know, will I ever truly base my self-worth on just who I am as a person. It's like, I've done lots and lots of reading around this in the last 12 months in my studies. And I think it's just a really hard concept to just read and go, yeah, I'm going to do that tomorrow. It shit takes practice, and it takes I suppose the confidence to watch yourself and witness yourself. So I remember when we did our workshop, I totally said to you, like, my ego is gone out of the kitchen. I can have McDonald's and not give a shit about it, but my ego is still there on the mat. And my ego is still there in lots of ways. But I don't give myself, like you said, compassion. I don't give myself a hard time anymore when I witness that part of me. I'm like, there she is. She's here now. What's she here for? And spend a little bit of time figuring out why. Sometimes I don't get to the bottom of it. I think that's just part of the human experience, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it's a really good step to notice it. Do you know, to notice the the little criticism, you know, that little criticizing voice inside your head. I think if you didn't notice it, then you'd be in deep trouble.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that we notice it and we're like, oh, there she is, you know. I've called mine Samantha, and I'm like, no, Samantha, that is not true. You know, I'll challenge her now.
That's Gaz, mine is Jessica. How do you find the mat helps you for that? So I would say that's one place that my ego is still there, but I can watch for my ego. It's almost like I'm like, oh, here it is, and I can work with it. How do you find the mat helps you with that?
Yeah, I think because in yoga, all of your movements are married to a breath. So most of the time as we're moving up, there'll be an inhale. As we're moving down or folding forwards, there'll be an exhale. So yoga to me is almost like this moving meditation, because with every movement, there's an inhale, there's an exhale. And so what we're doing there's a few things going on. So the mind doesn't get as much of a chance to kind of run away with itself, because you're focusing on the movement, which movement's coming next. Am I inhaling? Am I exhaling? So you're kind of giving the mind a wee job to do whilst you're on the mat. So that's kind of stopped some of the racing. And then the other thing we're doing in yoga is we're breathing abdominally all the time, which means we're breathing into our bellies. Most of us have kind of defaulted into this chest breath, which is quite short, quite shallow. And every time I ask someone to take a deep inhale, they'll go, anybody not watching this, just listening would be like, what is she doing? So when I inhale, they lift their chest, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in yoga, we do the complete opposite. A deep inhale, there's nothing to do with the chest, and it all goes down into the tummy, which stimulates the vagus nerve, which triggers the nervous system to relax. So it's like there's so many Brucey bonuses. There's so many things happening at once as we practice yoga. So we're number one, slowing down the breath, which helps to calm the nervous system. We're breathing abdominally, stimulating that vagus nerve, which helps to calm the nervous system. We're giving that monkey mind a little break because we're focusing on movement, on inhales and exhales. And so at the end of it, then there's just this sense of like, oh, that was lovely. Like that was a lovely break from my normal, like, from my normal pace, from my normal busy, either busy movement or busy mind. And you just feel better. It's like my husband was saying to me, like I was looking for like, a slogan, like a tagline or something for my business. And he was like, how about just saying like, it makes you feel better? No fancy slogans, like just, it is what it is. And I was like, yeah, actually you might be right, because everybody just wants to feel better. They want to feel better physically, mentally. And yoga does that. Like, that's why I'm so passionate about it. It ticks for me all those boxes, and it gives us a toolkit that we can then reach into when we need it. So like, for instance, if I come home and my back's at me, I know exactly what yoga stretch to put myself into to ease at my back. I'm going somewhere and I'm feeling anxious. I know what breathing technique to do as I'm driving there to help settle myself and prepare me to be sharper and more focused and more present. And that's just what I love about it. Like yoga, this is why I want everybody in Ireland to do yoga, is so that everybody will have these tools in their toolkit and then go, oh, I need that one today. And then I can take this one tomorrow. I think as well, you'll stumble into yoga when it's the right time for you, which sounds a bit like woo-woo. But I mean, when I first tried it, no way, Jose. It was way too slow, way too boring. Didn't want anything to do with it, It was only when I went back to it again. I'd say it took me like a good, I don't know, I tried it, thought it was crap, walked away. But that was my number one fault, because I just tried one teacher, one session, and was like, nah, not for me. I know better.
Yeah.
So it took me about a year to go back to it again. And I only went back because I kept getting an injury from my training, from the triathlon training. So I was like, oh, I like disgruntly went, is that a word? Disgruntly?
I'm always making up my own words, so we'll go with disgruntly.
So disgruntly went back to it like a year later just to stop me getting injured.
Yeah.
Like you said in the intro, was only actually at that same time my dad wasn't well. And I was so blown away by the fact that I didn't think about him while I was on the mat, because it was a time when he was so ill in hospital. Someone was always there. There was always something to be brought down. There was always, this wee, just the wee thoughts going on all the time. And I was really surprised that I didn't think about my dad, because it was all consuming at that time in my life. That's really what intrigued me. It was the headspace. I was like, hang on a wee second here. There's more to this now than just stretching.
I think the last piece I kind of wanted us to touch on was about the flexibility. And for me, yoga is less about the flexibility, the physical flexibility, but more about what I've mentioned and you've mentioned, is that strength and that connection with yourself, and even patience. Even when you tell your story about like your mind stopped, and that's when yoga shifted for you, is that you saw the benefit beyond the physical. I would always say that to people when I went purely for physical motivation to exercise. I didn't exercise when I was younger. I went everything. I did a little bit of everything. And then I went, nah, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. The only thing that brought consistency was when I felt the benefit. And how do we feel the benefit? We feel it in our mind and we feel it in our body, because that's what we understand as wellness, is that once we can understand our emotions, some days I'll go to the mat and I'll bring tears with me on the mat, and that's okay. I suppose sometimes I think, like, I heard a great phrase one time, yoga is like a therapy session in motion. If we can go through it, and somebody who sits with people now, and I do really see the benefit that yoga can have to help us process maybe some of the pieces that we're hearing about ourselves, or some of the pieces of health information. And it's just that place. You can have it whirring away in your background of your mind, but you take your mind off it, and then sometimes the solutions come to people.
Yeah, definitely. It's that thing, is like when we keep pushing and pushing and trying to find a solution, and we just keep coming up against a brick wall. Whereas when we step back and we just kind of put our hands up, and well, not even that, but just take a step back from it and just do something enjoyable, you can have your little aha moment then, when you're doing something that just makes you feel, like you said, makes you feel good. There is a massive thing that goes on energetically in our bodies when we practice yoga. And that's that movement of the energy up from the chakras. So you've got 7 of them in total. And I tend to be quite scientific in my teachings and very like less woo-woo.
Yeah.
If someone is brand new to yoga and they come into the room and I start talking to them about their chakras and they're just kind of like, right, this one's lost the plot. She's up there with the fairies. But so I try to talk to them in terms of energy, and I do certain things and I'll just get them to tune into like their fingertips and say, okay, can you feel tingling there now? And they'd be like, actually, yeah, I can. And I'm like, okay, that's energy. So energy, it's not something that we can see, but when we practice and when we learn to tune into it, we can definitely feel it in the body. And so what we're doing in yoga through the movements as well is we're shifting the energy throughout the body. And so when energy becomes stuck or stagnant in a certain place in the body, that's when there can be dis-ease in that area. And so that's another benefit of doing yoga. So you've got this physical thing where, yeah, you're physically stretching your muscles, you're lengthening the fascia and the connective tissues, you're distracting your mind, you're stimulating your nervous system, but now you're also shifting the energy. So you're working the energetic body as well. So it's like this. So yoga means union, to unite. Okay. So what we're doing on the yoga mat is we're uniting the entire body, the physical, the mental, the energetic, everything is been brought back into harmony. It's been brought back into connection, into balance. And that's why we feel so bloody awesome after we do some yoga.
I was mentioned to you earlier, one of the first times I sat in a mat was in Kathmandu when I was back in my heyday of traveling around the world. And I loved it, but it's taken me a long time to get back to, that was all about the chakras. It's taken me a long, long time to get back. And as I said, I know a little bit. It's piqued my curiosity, but I'm not even there yet. But I feel the benefit of that energy. And even when you're talking there about energy, I would always say for people who struggle with IBS, one of my challenges was IBS with my health, and the breath and moving energy around my body was more important than, I give poor chia seeds a bad raw deal, but sometimes nutrition information is helpful. And sometimes when we interact with that nutrition information, it's not quite helpful because somebody with IBS, there's always a psychodynamic or a psychological element to it, and we don't focus on that enough. So bringing the breath in with the food and the yoga is a really great way of not thinking about it, but you're doing it, and your body feels the benefit of the movement and the stretching around that part of your body. So there's a little tip for anyone who struggles with IBS: get in your mat.
Yeah, it's not ever like you'll never go to your GP and they will say, right, here's a prescription for your energetic body, for your energy field. And rightly so, because it's very hard for science to measure it. And so if it's not measurable in science, then no one's going to teach it because you just sound like a whack job. Okay. A little bit of my reluctance as well. My students come in, especially if they're very new. If they already know me and like me and trust me, cool, I'll talk about energy all the time.
Yeah.
But definitely, if there is someone listening that is struggling with something and they haven't been able to clear it up through nutrition or through, I don't know, physio or through, so a little side note, right? I had horrendous issues with hemorrhoids and fissures and went through everything, all the medical route to try to cure them. And it was only when I addressed an emotional issue that they started to clear up. And I mean, at least 3 or 4 years with every doctor that looks at your bum, I was with them. It was so bad. It was really painful. And of course I would get, all the laxatives, and I would say, oh, you need to eat more fiber. You need to drink more water. I'm like, lads, you don't understand. I drink like only water. I don't drink soft drinks. I eat broccoli for breakfast. I was like, it's not a fiber water issue. It was only then when I went to a kinesiologist and she actually pinpointed the emotional. So she's like, what happened in this year? In and around this month, and we could turn back the clock. And then when I unpacked that and worked through that emotionally, the issues resolved. I couldn't believe it. I was like, you're having a freaking laugh. Why didn't somebody tell me to look at the emotional side of the
I think what you say there is like, I've gone through my own process of, I suppose you've got the conventional medicine and then you've got what we call alternative therapies, and in the initial days, there was anger. It's like, why did nobody tell me this from the doctors? But remembering that medical intervention is for acute reasons, and not everyone thinks like we do. Is like, okay, well, what didn't work for me? So I always ask myself the question, what's not been asked? And that comes back to your own intuition. It's like, what's missing here? And I do really believe in the four bodies. You've got your thinking body, you've got your emotional body, you've got your physical body, and you've got your spiritual body. And can you do a little bit in all of those to help dampen down your symptoms, to figure out, okay, what actually do I need to do for me? So it's like we're doing a little bit of it all, rather than just getting knee deep, which was me. I was all into one area, and then that didn't work, and I go all into another area. And it was learning that actually, if I could just divide myself across those key areas, lean into all the different supports within that, then I can achieve symptom management and then growth from there. So I hope that whoever's been listening has been inspired to check out Vitality Vibe in the first instance. For yoga. But as Shirley said, if she's not for you, and I love that, because I'll never be the right coach for everyone, and I never want to be. It's an approach. If what you've tried hasn't worked for you, or if you've tried even somebody else in terms of your nutrition, just like what you're saying about your yoga, there's always somebody. It's the relationship that matches, and if your energies connect, we're back to that one again, then it'll be right for you. So Vitality Vibe.
I teach online. And then I teach for anybody in the locality. So online for anybody who wants to come. And then in the beach on Blackrock and County Louth during the summer months for anyone who lives in and around the area. We do lots of lovely sessions down there. We just kicked back last week and it was magic. Like, there's such lovely energy again. There's such lovely energy. And there's such just a really lovely community that come out, and they're just such beautiful people, and they're just there to have a little bit of crack, to have a bit of a stretch. There's no egos there. It's just a really lovely thing. And then I do some workshops, retreats, things like that scattered throughout the year. But vitalityvibe.ie is the website, and that's where you kind of find all that information, and my social media pages as well for any of that.
I am so grateful for you joining me.
Thanks so much, Denise. Have a lovely day.